Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome dear students. This is a video for the subject of education for the course of Bachelor's in Education and for the paper of Conceptual Foundations of Education. This video is based on the sociological basis of education, and in this lecture we are going to discuss the functionalist and conflict perspectives. This video has been recorded by Dr. Iram Khan. The course coordinator and the presenter for this video is Dr. Iram Khan from Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. The academic expert or the reviewer for this video is Dr. Savita Kaushal from Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. This video is produced under the project DTH Swayam Prabha channels of MHRD or Ministry of Education, Government of India. Hello dear students, I am Dr. Iram Khan, Assistant Professor at IASC, Faculty of Education, Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. Today we are going to have a discussion on sociological basis of education, and in this lecture we will be discussing the functionalist and conflict perspective. So first let us start with the objectives of this session. The objectives of this session are to distinguish macro approaches in sociology from its micro approaches, to discuss the most important beliefs and assumptions of functionalism and conflict theory, to make a comparison between functionalism and conflict theory. So let us start with the view on macro and micro approaches of sociology. In terms of the theories, different sociologists have a view that there are two different camps. The first one is macro sociology and the other one is micro sociology. Macro sociologists focus on the big picture, which usually means such things as social structure, social institutions, and social, political, and economic change. They look at the large-scale social forces that change the course of human society and the lives of individuals. Whereas on the contrary to them, microsociologists on the contrary, they actually study social interactions. They look at how families and the people who work together and all the other small groups of people interact with each other, why they interact, the way they interact, and how they interpret the meanings of their own interactions and of the social settings in which they find themselves, or in those social settings in which they are. So often we have seen that macro and micro sociologists look at the same phenomena but in different ways. Their views taken together offer a different type of understanding of the phenomena, and that particular understanding basically can be taken up as a separate type of approach, and either approach can offer alone a different meaning to a particular scenario. According to Collins 1994, within the broad macro camp, there are two perspectives which dominate. The first one is functionalism and the other one is conflict theory. And within the micro camp, there are two different perspectives which exist there. And the first one is named as symbolic interactionism and the other one is utilitarianism, which is often called as rational choice theory or exchange theory. So let us just have a look on the major assumptions of the theoretical perspective of all these four. But here in this lecture, we will be discussing in detail the functionalism and conflict theory only. So the first one, which is functionalism, the major assumption of functionalism is that social stability is necessary to have a strong society, and uh, adequate socialization and social integration are necessary to achieve social stability. Society's social institutions perform important functions to help ensure the social stability, and slow social change is desirable. But if we have rapid social changes, basically it threatens the social order. So in this way, we can say that this is the major assumption of the functionalism theory, which is basically considered under the category of a macro theory. Then the major assumption of the conflict theory is that society is characterized by pervasive inequality based on social class, gender, and other factors. Far-reaching social change is needed to reduce or eliminate social inequality and to create an egalitarian society. Conflict theory is basically a theory which again comes under the category of macro theory. Then comes the category of micro theories, and the first one here, which we will be not detailing today in this session, but let's just have a look at what exactly it means, which is the symbolic interactionism. Basically, people construct their roles as they interact. They do not merely learn the roles that society has set out for them. As this interaction occurs, individuals negotiate their definitions of the situations in which they find themselves and socially construct the reality of these situations. And in doing this, all these activities, they actually rely heavily on symbols, such as these symbols can be words, gestures, which are basically used to reach a shared understanding of their interaction. Symbolic interaction is basically, or the symbolic interactionism theory comes under the micro theory of sociological thought process. Then comes the other one, which is utilitarianism or the rational choice theory. At times, it is also known as the exchange theory. So, people here, what exactly is the major assumption? It is that people act to maximize their advantages in a given situation and to reduce their disadvantages. If they decide that benefits outweigh disadvantages, they will initiate the interaction or continue it if it is already underway. If they instead decide that disadvantage outweigh benefits, they will decline to begin interacting or stop the interaction if already the interaction has begun. So social order is possible because people realize that it will be in their best interest to complete or to basically to have a kind of cooperation and to make the compromises when they are very much necessary to make. So basically, people try to maximize their advantages with the cooperative measures, and where at times they also make certain compromises whenever the compromises are necessary to make. So this basically comes under the utilitarianism, which is a theory which comes under the micro theory of sociology. So what is functionalism? Functionalism is also known as the functionalist perspective. It actually arose out of the two great revolutions of the 18th and 19th centuries. The first was the French Revolution of 1789, whose intense violence and bloody terror actually shocked the entire European world to their core. The aristocracy throughout the Europe feared that revolution would spread to their own lands, and intellectuals feared that social order is going to crumble. Then the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century reinforced these concerns. Starting first in Europe and then in the United States, the Industrial Revolution led to many changes, including the rise and growth of cities, as people started to leave the farmlands or the village areas and started coming to the places which were near to the factories or the industrial areas. As the cities started growing up, people lived in increasingly poor, crowded, and very vulnerable conditions. One result of these conditions was actually mass violence, as mobs of the poor roamed the streets of European and American cities. They attacked the bystanders or the people who were on the road. They actually destroyed the property and generally wreaked havoc in the places which were actually encroached by these people. So, in response, the intellectuals began to write that a strong society, as exemplified by strong social bonds and rules, and effective socialization was needed to basically prevent the social order from disintegrating. And this is actually mentioned in a very famous work of Collins in 1994. In this regard, their view was similar to that of the 20th century's novel authored by William Golding. Uh, Basically, this novel is written in 1954 and it is titled as Lord of the Flies, which many college students read in their high school. Some British boys are stranded on an island after a plane crash. So basically, this is an anecdote which is mentioned in this novel, that some of the British boys are stranded on an island after a plane crash. No longer supervised by adults and no longer in a society as they once knew it and as they once were the part of. They are not sure how to proceed and come up with new rules of their behavior. These rules prove ineffective and the boys slowly become savages, as the book calls them. Basically, it is mentioned in the book itself. And these boys who are now stranded here in this island, because of the unworking or unruly provisions, they become savages and they even commit murder. So basically, Golding's view echoes back to that of the conservative intellectuals writing in the aftermath of the French and industrial revolutions, that without a strong society and effective socialization, these authors have warned that social order breaks down and violence and other signs of social disorder will be the resultant of this breaking of the social order. Here we can discuss about the sociological perspective of Emile Durkheim, who is considered to be largely responsible for this sociological perspective. He has written a lot of texts which have been showing his views about this perspective. Adopting the conservative intellectuals' view of the need for a strong society, basically, he has felt that human beings have desires that result in chaos unless society limits them. In the words of Durkheim, under quotes, to achieve any other result, the passions first must be limited. But since the individual has no way of limiting them, this must be done by some force exterior to him. Quotes close. So basically here, this force, according to Durkheim, is the moral authority of society, which is very much essential to make a control over uh, the the choices, or you can say that the powers or the passions of a human being, to go against uh, the limitations or against the point of view, or you can say the life of another human being. In order to explain that how society limit the individual aspirations, Durkheim has emphasized two related social mechanisms. The first one is socialization and the other one is social integration. Socialization helps us to learn the society's rule and the need to cooperate, as people end up generally agreeing on important norms and values, while social integration basically are our ties to other people and to social institutions. For example, mm, uh, a religion and the family helps to socialize us and to integrate us into society and reinforce our respect for its rules. So in general, Durkheim has actually mentioned that society comprises many type of social facts or forces external to the individual that affect and constrain individual attitudes and behavior. The result is that socialization and social integration help to establish a strong set of social rules. And Durkheim basically calls it a strong collective conscience, which can be seen as a need for a stable society. So by doing so, the society actually creates a kind of cocoon around the individual, making him or her less individualistic and more a member of the group. And this is basically a thought which is mentioned by Collins in his work of 1994. So weak rules or social ties weaken this moral cocoon and lead to social disorder. And Durkheim's view represent the core tradition of sociology that lies at the heart of the sociological perspective. Durkheim has used suicide to illustrate how social disorder can result from a weakening of society's moral cocoon. Focusing on basically he worked a lot on the suicide rates of different groups. So focusing on group rates of suicide, he felt that could not be explained simply in terms of individual unhappiness. This suicide rate cannot be explained only on the basis of individual unhappiness, and instead resulted from external forces. So he has given some of the examples in order to explain all these things. So one such force can be the anomie or normlessness, which results from situations such as periods of rapid social change. When social norms are weak and unclear, or social ties are weak, then anomie sets in. People become more unclear about how to deal with problems in their life. Their aspirations no longer limited by society's constraints cannot be fulfilled. So the frustration stemming from anomie leads some people to commit suicide. To test his theory, Durkheim gathered some of the suicide rate data and found, basically he did his experiments and he actually collected all that data from the from whatever survey or whatever studies he has done, and he did his studies on two group of people. One group was the Protestants and the other group was the group of Catholics. So he gathered the suicide rate data and found that Protestants had higher suicide rates than the Catholics. And to explain this difference, he rejected the idea that Protestants were less happy than Catholics and instead reasoned that Catholic doctrine provides many more rules for behavior and thinking than basically we can find in the Protestant doctrine. So Protestants' aspirations were uh, in this way less constrained than Catholics' desires. So in time of in that periods or times when there was a trouble, Protestants also have fewer norms uh, to rely for all those pointers, or you can say cues, uh, for how to coming out of those situations. So Protestants have fewer norms on which to rely for comfort and support than the Catholics. Basically, Catholics were having much more norms and much more rules in their system. So he also thought that Protestants' ties to each other were weaker than those which can be seen among the Catholics. And this actually provided the Protestants fewer social support networks to turn to when they were in trouble. So, this was something which was encountered by Durkheim, and in addition to this, Protestant belief is ambivalent about suicide, while Catholic doctrine condemns suicide. So all of these properties of religious group membership combine to produce higher suicide rates among the Protestants than among the Catholics. So this is something, a kind of study of Durkheim, which has shown that if there are much more rules, much more norms, and stricter rules and norms, then there is a possibility that people are having better opportunities, or better kind of living status um in their lives, which actually is reflected by this study which has been done by Durkheim. And today's functionalist perspective arises out of Durkheim's work and that of other conservative intellectuals of the 19th century. It uses the human body as a model for understanding society. Like in the human body, our various organs and other body parts serve important functions for the ongoing health and stability of our body. Like in case of our eyes, they are helping us to see, or they actually work for seeing. Our ears help us to hear. Our heart circulates our blood, and then all the other organs do the specified work for which they are actually uh, made. So just as we can understand the body by describing and understanding the functions that its parts serve for its health and stability, in the same way we understand society by describing and understanding the functions that its parts, or more accurately its social institutions, serve for the ongoing health and stability of the society. So in this way, functionalism emphasizes the importance of social institutions such as the family, religion, and education for producing a stable society. Similar to the view of conservative intellectuals, from which basically this type of view has grown, that functionalism is skeptical of rapid social change and other major social upheaval. The analogy of the human body helps us understand this skepticism. In our body, any sudden or any kind of change which has suddenly appeared, or any rapid change, is considered as a sign of danger to our health. So, for example, if we break a bone in any of our limbs, we have trouble in walking or doing any sort of work. So, or if we any of our sense organs stop working, like in case of our eardrums have some problem and we stop hearing, there will be a lot of problem which we are going to face. So that is a kind of sudden change which has occurred, which is always a problematic situation. But on the other hand, slow changes, like we can see that there are changes which occur and they are so slow that even we don't feel them, like the growth of our hair, growth of nails. um, these are very fine, and we can consider all of these changes as normal changes or normal things. But sudden changes like those just we have described right now, breaking of a bone, or non-working of any of the sense organs, eyes or ears, uh, that will be very much troublesome and obvious trouble for anybody. So, by this analogy, sudden and rapid changes in society, its social institutions are actually uh, they become troubled if there is a sudden or a rapid change which is encountered in the society. So this is basically considered in the functionalist perspective. So if the human body evolved to its present form and functions, uh, and whatever functions for which the organs are made, uh, then the functions, if they are properly going on, then there is no any problem. But in the at the same time, if there is something happening in a rapid way to any of the organ and the organ stops working, then in that case we all will be in a problem. So in the same way, in a society, if some of the constituent of the society or any of the institution of the society suddenly stop working, then in that case there will be a problem in the social order. Maybe the evolutionary perspective of the society can also be in danger. So we can say that uh, the evolution of society is basically being disturbed. So society evolved to its present form and functions because these made sense. Whenever there is a change in the society, it is for the good, then only that change will be occurring and reoccurring. So in this way we can say that any sudden change in society can be which is threatening to it, and it threatens the stability and future, that change is not considered as a good thing. So by taking a skeptical approach to social change, functionalism supports the status quo and is in this way often regarded as a conservative perspective. Let us discuss the conflict theory. In many ways, conflict theory is the opposite of functionalism, but it is very much ironical to mention that this is also the outgrowth of the Industrial Revolution, and all the praises are for the very famous sociologist Karl Marx and his collaborator Friedrich Engels. Whereas the conservative intellectuals feared the mass violence resulting from industrialization, basically Marx and Engels, they they were against that situation, and the conditions they felt were actually responsible for the mass violence, and the capitalist society they felt was the responsible feature or the responsible part of the society for all these situations, for all the conditions. So instead of fearing the breakdown of social order that mass violence represented, they felt that revolutionary violence was needed to eliminate capitalism and the poverty and misery they saw as its inevitable result. According to Marx and Engels, every society is divided into two classes based on the ownership of the means of production. And what exactly the means of productions can be mentioned? Basically, they can be the tools, the factories, the equipment which are required for the production activity. So, in the capitalist society, the bourgeois or ruling class owns the means of production, while the proletariat or the working class does not own the means of production, and On the other hand, they actually um, can be considered as the oppressed and exploited class by the ruling class. This difference creates automatic conflict of interest between the two groups. Simply putting, the Borghese is interested in maintaining its position at the top of society, while the proletariat interest lies in rising up from the bottom and overthrown the Borghese to create an egalitarian society. So, in a capitalist society, Marx and Engels wrote that revolution is inevitable because of structural contradictions arising from the very nature of capitalism. Because profit is the main goal of the capitalistic society, and the ruling class were having the interest of maximizing their profit. To do this maximization of their profit, these capitalists try to keep wages as low as possible and to spend as little money as possible on working conditions of the people who are actually um, as the on the other hand end or working as a labor. So this central fact of capitalism said basically Marx and Engels have told that this central fact of capitalism eventually prompts the rise among workers of class consciousness or an awareness of the reasons for their oppression. So this class consciousness in turn leads them to revolt against the workers to eliminate the oppression and exploitation they suffer. So basically from here only the class consciousness, with the class consciousness, the revolt and a kind of conflict starts happening in the working class. So over the years, Marx and Engels' views on the nature of capitalism and class relations have greatly influenced social, political, and economic theory and also inspired revolutionaries in nations around the world. And in history, we have seen that it is not very much supported because we have seen that the predictions made by Marx and Engels that capitalism will inevitably result in a revolution of the proletariat. Um, in few of the cases, it is not seen in the society. For example, no such revolution has occurred in the United States, where workers never developed the degree of class consciousness envisioned by Marx and Engels. Because the United States is thought to be a free society where everyone has the opportunity to succeed. Even poor Americans feel that the system is basically just and it is going to help them out for growing. So this way, various aspects of American society and ideology have helped to minimize the development of class consciousness and prevent the revolution that Marx and Engels have actually foreseen or they have predicted. So despite this shortcoming, this basic view of conflict arising from unequal positions held by members of society lies at the heart of the the conflict theory, which we are right now discussing. So this theory emphasizes that different groups in society have different interests stemming from their different social positions. These different interests in turn lead to different views on important social issues. Some versions of the theory basically it is rooted the conflict in divisions based on race and ethnicity, gender, and other such differences, while other versions follow Marx and Engels in seeing conflict arising out of different positions in the economic structure. Here we need to discuss about the feminist theory also. Feminist theory has developed in sociology and other disciplines since the 1970s, and for our purposes, um we will be considering it as a special application of conflict theory. In this case, the conflict concerns gender inequality rather than the class inequality, which was emphasized by Marx and Engels. Although many variations of feminist theory exist, they all emphasize that that theory is filled with the different type of gender inequality, such of these gender inequalities, uh, which women are uh, where women are considered to be the subordinate sex in many dimensions of social, political, and economic life. And this is mentioned in the text which is prepared by Tong in 2009. Liberal feminists view gender inequality as arising out of gender differences in socialization, while the Marxist feminists say that this inequality is a result of the rise of capitalism, which made women dependent on men for economic support. So, on the other hand, radical feminists view that gender inequality is present in all societies, and maybe you can even view this gender inequality in those societies where there is no any consequence of capitalism. So we can mention this, that even not only in capitalist society, in other societies also we can view some sort of gender inequality. So this is something where we can see that the views of Marx and Engels, where they are talking about the class inequality, they emphasize about the class inequality. There are certain other type of inequalities where this one, the inequality which is in terms of gender, um, or which actually is mentioned in the feminist theory, these type of inequalities are also there in the society. Let us just have a comparison, that how this functionalist theory and the conflict theory are very much contrary to each other, or if they are having any type of similarity. So just have a look on all those pointers which are very much important to consider when we are discussing about these two theories at one go. So the first point is that a major problem with functionalist theory is that it tends to support the status quo, and in this way seems to favor the existing inequalities based on race, social class, and gender. By emphasizing the contributions of social institutions such as the family and education to social stability, functionalist theory minimizes the ways in which these institutions contribute to social inequality. On the contrary, conflict theory's problems are the opposite of the functionalist theories. By emphasizing inequality and dissensus in society, conflict theory overlooks the large degree of consensus uh, on many important issues. And by emphasizing the ways in which social institutions contribute to social inequality, conflict theory minimizes the ways in which these institutions are necessary for society's stability. In general, whenever we talk about conflict theory, we can say that conflict theory emphasizes that the various parts of society contribute to ongoing inequality, whereas functionalist theory, uh, as we have also seen, that it stresses that they contribute to the ongoing stability of society. And while the functionalist theory emphasizes the benefits of the various parts of society for ongoing social stability, the conflict theory favors social change to reduce inequality. So in this regard, the conflict theory may be considered a progressive theory or a progressive perspective uh, if we compare it with the functionalist theory. So with this, now we have reached to the end of this session. Let us just have a quick recap of what we have studied here. We have studied that the sociological theories may be broadly divided into macro approaches and micro approaches. Then we saw that the functionalism approach basically emphasizes the importance of social institutions for social stability and implies that far-reaching social change will be socially harmful. Then we saw the conflict theory, which emphasizes social inequality, and it actually suggests that far-reaching social change is needed to achieve a just society. Then we have also made a comparison between the functionalism approach and the conflict theory, and we have seen that both of them are very much contrary to each other. One talks about the working of different units of the society or the social institutions, and the other one is actually talking about the same status or creating a kind of situation or a society which is not having any sort of social inequality. So in this way we have now seen all those aspects which are related to the sociological theories which are coming under the macro approaches, which are the functionalism theory and the conflict theory. These are few of those references and suggested further readings which I have discussed while creating this lecture. This is basically a paper or a area which needs a lot of study. So I recommend these readings to all of you. You can also go ahead and read all these books and material, and you can enhance your knowledge much more, your understanding much more in terms of these theories and approaches. From my side, thank you for this time, and we will see each other in another session. Thank you so much. Dear students, you are watching a video on sociological basis of education, and in this lecture the discussion was made on functionalist and conflict perspectives. This video lecture was recorded by faculty at home during the national lockdown period for COVID-19 pandemic using minimal technical resources. Technical errors, if any, are unintentional and may please be ignored. For any queries with regard to this lecture or broadcast, kindly send your email to techsupport@dth.ac.in. Thank you so much.